Welcome to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. My name is Tony DiAugustino. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. In this series of exclusive podcasts, we will meet with tenured and growing leaders in the childcare field, typically operating medium to very large childcare operations from tens of schools to thousands of schools. Our incentive is to learn what has been the path and traits that make outstanding leaders. Join us to glean the sage wisdom from these experienced individuals. Now, let's get started with ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders.
When you think about training, it really should not be a burden. It should not be something that your administrative staff has to think about who they are assigning, when a person has completed this, have they completed this, did they make their continuing education units, what happens if licensing walks in, and blah, blah, blah. Well, ECE University really helps solve a lot of those issues because you are able to assign courses, multiple courses, entire learning paths, all to an individual according to what their specific need is. So prescriptive learning. It allows them to take one course, and after that course is done, it sets them on the journey for the next course and so forth and so on. You can create different paths depending on the person's job role, whether it be a assistant teacher, an administrator, it doesn't matter. You can put that together yourself with the different courses we have there. You can blend the courses of what we offer you with 200 plus hours of courseware, as well as any courses you want to put on there and have a full learning path. A little bit of tip and trick about ECE University.
Welcome to ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. I am your host, Tony DiAugustino, founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. Over the last 10 years, we have been bringing solutions and support to the early care and education industry to focus on our why, to help develop the next generation of amazing children. Today's guest is Joe Kirchner, CEO of Primrose Schools, which provides premier early education and care for families in more than 530 locations across the U.S. I am excited for this. I've been looking to have Joe come on this program for a while. Joe started with Primrose back in 1990 and became president and CEO in 1999. Under her leadership, its growth from just 4 schools in Atlanta to a national leader in early child care education has been amazing. She founded the Primrose Schools Children's Foundation and launched the Primrose Promise Initiative, raising over $5.5 million for underserved children to date. Joe is a longtime advocate for high-quality education and care in the early education space, co-chairing the Early Education and Care Consortium to help shape public policy and advocacy in our field. Under her leadership, Primrose pioneered a model that blends purposeful play with leading and learning, becoming the first early education franchise to earn corporate accreditation. She is a strong voice for public-private partnership and champions a mixed delivery model, believing families deserve both choice and quality when it comes to care. Joe has been recognized with multiple honors, including IFA Entrepreneur of the Year in 2023, 2 Gold Stevie Awards for Female Executive of the Year, and a Lifetime Achievement back in 2022. EY Entrepreneur of the Year National Finalist in the Resilience category. Joe helped launch the Westlakes Early Learning Center, an innovative model that brings together early education, health, and social services all under one roof. She's now working to replicate that model in other communities throughout the foundation. Joe's journey into the space started with personal challenge many parents face, finding quality child care. On her desk, she keeps a plaque that reads, "I'm still learning." A Michelangelo quote she also gifts to new executives to promote growth, curiosity, and collaboration. I'm very excited for this conversation today. Please join me in welcoming Joe Kirchner to the ECE CEO Biography. Here we go. Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Tony?
I am doing great. We almost act as if we haven't had a pre-call, but we have had a little bit of pre-call here, and it was wonderful to catch up with you. And I'm talking to Joe, who's down in sunny Atlanta right now. And that's probably an understatement.
It is an understatement. It's fine.
And I have the pleasure to be up in the Finger Lakes region today, so I have a little bit cooler on her. But we're going to just jump right on in. So, with that said, Joe, thanks for joining us on ECE CEO Biography. And I want to start off just on a little bit of a lighter note. You know, when you were younger and your younger days, not saying that you're not already still young, in our younger days, uh, when you were actually more of children, adolescents, teenage years, was there ever anything that pointed to the fact that you'd find yourself in leadership or anything that you saw in yourself that said, I might have capabilities in the area to help move something forward?
Well, this is going to be a funny answer. It
Okay.
my first job as a president when I was 15
Wow.
was the president of the Beatles Club in
Oh,
the state of
wow.
Ohio. And I loved it. Of course, I was very passionate. I thought I was going to marry Paul McCartney someday. The problem is he just never had a chance to meet me.
Exactly. I'll tell you that Linda messed it all up for you.
I know, but that was my first leadership role, and it was something I was passionate about. I loved their music, and then found myself in an opportunity once I joined the club that they needed a leader, and I thought, well, let's go ahead and do it. I've never done it, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it. So I think that really had something to do with my confidence and lack of fear, I would say, when I had the opportunity to become the CEO of Primrose. I didn't start out to be a CEO.
Sure, but it is interesting that you mentioned that being the president of a Beatles club, when you saw that opportunity, within you, did you just have the confidence, or was it just maybe a lack of understanding the positives, the south sides of it, the things that may, become difficult, things of that nature at that age? Or was it something that you were starting to learn once you got in and saying, you know what, this is something I really can do?
So I've unintentionally followed a path that became intentional, and that is being involved with things you're passionate about, right? So
Mhm.
I'm very passionate about their music and really a very strong fan. And so the passion led me to not have the fear,
Okay.
the passion of the opportunity to be engaged with like-minded people. And
Yeah.
and then, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I'm a learner. I've always been a continuous learner. So I knew there'd be opportunity to learn.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you say that because we will obviously talk more about Primrose and overall your passion for different things because you obviously have done different things with different foundations and the like. And I think passion is really important. When I got into the childcare business myself, I had no intention of getting in. But my passion actually came from viewing one or two schools and recognizing, wow, there's a lot of work that could go on here, but there could be a really big outcome. And that's where I started getting my why on it. When you were young back then, who were your biggest influences?
Well, I went to a Catholic school. My parents were both Catholic. So the school that I went to, the nuns that were there were very influential with me, but the culture within the school was very much about giving back and making a difference in the world. That your life was an important part of the ecosystem of the community and the country, and that you had a responsibility to find what you could be good at. And at the same time, whatever you did, you also had a responsibility to give back. So that was instilled within me. And then I just loved, I said already, I loved continual learning, and I loved that the teachers were teaching
Yeah,
constant. I never didn't want to go to school, and I loved learning everything I could learn. And so learning and education was important to me. And then I would say the fact that I loved watching the teachers teach. Obviously, the people they were teaching were children. And I
right.
had a spark for children,
Yeah.
a real spark for children, and I've always had it.
When you look back at it, was there any where you gleaned off of one person, whether it be a teacher, a non, a family member, anything that you sort of remember back where you got some aha moments about engaging with people and how to best engage with people that started to evolve who you were as a person?
So my dad was a telecommunications engineer, and he too was very passionate about his work. And I wouldn't say was really a workaholic, but he was very, very engaged in his work. And I would listen to him talk about it at dinner in the
Yeah.
evenings. And he gave me a book, um, a Dale Carnegie book
Okay.
that he had read, and he'd underlined it and it was highlighted. And I can't remember the name of the book at the moment, but I remember reading that and just devouring it. And of course, that was all about interpersonal relationships, right?
Yeah. I think it was it How to Win Friends and Influence
How
People.
to win friends and influence people. Absolutely. That was it.
Yeah, if that's not a cornerstone, like I already gave that to my boys too. And they're like, who's this
There's
guy? What?
universal truths in that, even though the world
It
changes,
is.
as much as it changes, the real things that drive success are the same.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting because a lot of that, the whole foundation of that book is really about how to build trust with others,
That's right.
right? That's what a lot of it is. And I'm assuming as we get into this a little bit more, I'm going to find out a little bit about your ascension into there. When you look at going through those more formative years as to what you were doing and what you wanted to do, you said you started engaging and getting more into like that of teaching in young children. Did you know out of the gate that this was likely the kind of field you were going to be into, or were you headed in another direction and then took a turn?
No, I had no, I wasn't, I had no vision to be a teacher. And I didn't think that I would be involved in education. I had another passion, that was fashion.
Okay.
So my direction when I graduated was to go to a junior college that taught fashion merchandising. I thought I would go to New York and be a buyer. That's what I wanted to do. And I loved that experience, the learning of it. But as soon as I got out of school and went to work, I did not love the hours of the retail business. It was, 7 days a week. And of course, when you're on the ground floor of that, you're working, from 10 or 9 to 9 at night. And I really have always been also very strategic. So I couldn't see myself doing that the rest of my life. And but I love the marketing part of the courses that I took and the marketing that was embedded in the fashion merchandising, setting up the products, promoting the products. I just went in that direction. And then I met my husband. We lived in Ohio and we moved to Atlanta, and I began to look for careers in marketing. And
Interesting.
I ended up a manufacturing slash sales rep for Procter Silex Corporation, and I
Okay.
traveled the Southeast. My husband was a pharmaceutical rep, and he traveled the Southeast. And without children, that was a wonderful life. We both had a lot of fun. But as the thing, that spark of children that I told you, I wanted to be a mom. I really wanted to be a mom. It was important to me. And so once we got to the South, we got pregnant, and my mother never worked, so I had never experienced childcare. But we had no family infrastructure. And when after the baby was born and I'd been home for a few months, I decided I was going to go back to work. And I started to look at childcare centers, and I literally was appalled at what I saw. They weren't very professional. Of course, this was in the 80s, late 80s. They weren't very professional, and they also just didn't meet the needs much of a working parent that wanted early education. They were minimum, for the most part, minimum wage babysitting and not
Right.
very nice facilities, to the point where I just didn't see how I was going to be able to leave my child. So I looked at all the other opportunities of people working in the neighborhood who might keep my child. I looked at bringing someone in my home. I tried all those, and then I decided I'll go back to what I knew, which was church. and a Catholic school, they had church preschools, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. The church preschool, though, was only half day. I knew my child was safe and there was good values there, but there wasn't any early learning. It wasn't
Right.
early education. And this passion for learning, I knew I didn't know it from a research base, but I just inherently knew those first 5 years were important. Today, of course, I know about brain development. I know so much more, but back then it was just inherently, I knew that that was important for my child. And it wasn't there either. So I had two children, 2.5 years apart. So for about 8 years, I worked and I juggled all that schedule of who could pick my child up at noon and go take them home. And then if they were sick or they were traveling, I had to cancel my appointments. And I started my own company for that reason, to have the flexibility, because my husband didn't have that flexibility, to be able to, when somebody couldn't pick them up,
Right.
if somebody was sick, take care of them. So that 8.5 years was I just didn't ever foresee that having children was going to have that much disruption to my life, and never feeling peaceful about it, because I felt like continuity in their day was very disrupted, from getting up and taking them to a church preschool, to picking them up, to go or letting somebody else take them. And it wasn't always the same person. And it was just not a very good situation. So I'd never thought about childcare as a business, but then I happened to meet the founders. I started my own company.
Okay.
I did marketing consulting work for mid-sized companies here in Atlanta. And I'm
Okay.
founder of Primrose. They had 3 half-day private preschools. And
Wow.
in that process, they asked me to come visit them and see their schools. They heard me speak at a Chamber of Commerce event where I was doing a project with the Chamber of Commerce to recruit major developers to the north side of Atlanta. And I was speaking about quality of life. And they were going to do these planned communities and where people could live, work, and play. And that quality of life was important for all 3. And I told my story about the lack of quality of life with children that are young, if there isn't an infrastructure there. And the founders were in the audience, and they came up and said, we'd love you to visit our schools. We'd like to be part of this project. And when I said schools, they said schools. And I said, do you mean a daycare center? And they said, no, it's a school. By then my children were in elementary school, but that's how I met the founders of Primrose.
Oh, wow. You know, it's interesting because your marketing background, starting a marketing company, and then really sort of identifying when you went in and you saw those different schools, what resonated with you when you saw those particular schools, and why did you really want to engage with them?
Well, it wasn't, again, that wasn't it planned, but it planted a seed.
Sure.
My personal challenges of what was right for my children. When the founders, I met them and they asked me to come visit, I already was preconditioned that it was going to be minimum wage babysitting environment that I had seen. And from the minute I drove on to the campus, and it was a campus of multiple buildings,
Wow.
the minute I drove on, I knew it was something different. It was beautifully landscaped, and you got out of the car and walked in. It smelled good. It looked good. There was a professional person there greeting me in a beautiful office. And then she knew I was coming. She knew my name, and she took me through the schools and let me see what they were doing. And what I saw was happy children engaged, teachers engaged, music and art and singing and play and joy, and it was consistent from room after room, classroom after classroom after classroom. I knew there was some intentionality about how did they bring that to life, because that's not normal.
Yeah. No, especially back then.
Right?
Yeah.
They had to be doing something. When the tour was over and I had the opportunity to talk to them afterwards, they said, well, we invited you here when we wanted you to see our school, but part of it is you have a marketing background, and we have 3 schools like this. There's about 1,000 children in the schools, but they're all half day. And we're getting all these calls from working moms who want to know, can you give me someone who can take my child home in the afternoon? And the light bulb went on. it was my very experience, right? And
Right.
they said, we think that we could get licensed by the state and we're at childcare services around our early learning model. And we believe we would meet the need, a big demand on the north side of Atlanta. And we'd like you to do the research to tell us if you think you could do that. So I did, but I already knew if they could get licensed to wrap childcare services, they would fill those facilities. And so within 18 months, they engaged me within 18 months, 3 half-day facilities with all the fixed costs already there, 3 half-day facilities were 90% full-time, which changed the financial model dramatically.
Yes. For a full day, already all the operational expenses, the personnel for the most part, just adding a little bit on for time.
Right. And so that's how I got involved as a consultant first. And then Mr. Irwin, who came from a background in retail, merchandising, federated department stores, multi-chain, multi-management, brand strategy. He came to me and he said, I have a problem. Can you meet me? I'm like, yes. And he said, I bought a fourth piece of property, but my wife, Marcy Bloom, doesn't want me to open another school because she has relationships and built trust with the teachers, with the families, with the communities. And it's 3 is enough. She doesn't want to do any more. But I've already bought the land. And the only way I can figure that I can build this fourth school is if I franchise it. And I remember looking at him like he had 2 heads. He said, you're not usually negative, Joe. Look, think about this. If we really could replicate this, then we could do 10 more schools in Atlanta. And he said, but I need you to go do the research. You study childcare, early education, franchising. I'll give you a month. And if you come back and say it's a bad idea, I'll just put the land up for sale. And I won't even tell Marcy because I don't want to get a divorce over this. No pressure, Joe. But I did the research and I knew it could be more than 10. He had a map right where he wanted to put 10 schools. And I remember saying to him, Paul, if you can do 10 and you can replicate exactly what you and Marcy have, if you can do that, then it isn't just 10. It would be something that could someday be a national brand. And then he looked at me like I had 2 heads. And he said, Joe, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. And you're trying to fly. Could you just help me franchise?
Well, sounds like he was reading your personality pretty right?
Yeah, he did. So that's the journey. That's how it happened. And then I did the research and set up the franchise sales and marketing strategy. His wife had the operational experience. He had the finance and the development background. And once they opened that first school, it was full within a year.
Wow. And we know that you folks now are up over 530 schools throughout the nation, which is amazing. And congratulations for what an achievement starting. Well, you started in 1990 with Primrose.
Yes.
And when did the franchising piece really start to take off after your first school, obviously?
So actually the first franchise owner was a parent in that school who was a franchise. And before we actually had the franchise agreement developed and the sales strategy put in place, and they came to us and said, we would love to do this. Could we be your first franchise owner?
Oh, wow.
They were our second franchise owner. So could we be your franchise owner? So we had that one under construction. By the time we got the agreement completed, but they opened as a kind of a quasi partnership, and then the first couple signed a franchise agreement, and then the second one became a franchise too. So, and it moved pretty rapidly in Atlanta because there was such a demand, and most up until maybe 15 years, 90% of the franchise owners were parents in the schools.
Well, I'm not surprised. I was living in Atlanta from 87 to 96 because I wanted to get out by the Olympics. And I remember, though, it was like people, like every U-Haul in the country was moving to Atlanta at that time.
Right.
It was just it was a wonderful time. What a boom time. When when you look back at it, because we do have a number of people who we've engaged with and we've talked to and we've seen who listen to the podcast too, who are on the cusp of wanting to do franchising, and it's a different world now for sure. And we know that it's not as easy. When you were going through the beginning of the franchising business, I assume there's issues that you don't know what you didn't know, and you had to figure things out, and there's legal considerations and all those type of things. What did you find as the biggest challenges of helping develop the first franchises with Primrose when you were, even outside the company as to you coming into the company?
Well, if you have a great concept and you think it can be franchised, it's got to be packaged in a way that someone who's never done it can implement it. So the biggest challenge initially was packaging it, right?
Hmm.
Putting the content for the curriculum, the marketing, and clearly first and foremost safety and security. So your operational procedures, your finance, all the different aspects of a business, any business. Needs to be integrated and systematized in a way that you can teach another person how to implement it well. And the good news is we didn't start out, with a big loan and a lot of stress on the owners and of the business because they had three businesses that were thriving and doing very well. So we took our time in the first 5 years and we opened one, and then the next year we opened two, and then the next year we opened three, and we took the time and continually assessed where the opportunities were to strengthen our systemic approach. That then helped us when we decided to start accelerating the growth. But all our growth was in Atlanta, probably for the first 5 years.
Sure.
So we didn't try to just award franchises anywhere and try to support them. We were strategic in that too. Create a market first where you can support it while you're learning all the things you didn't know and need to know to be successful. Because in franchising, as you know, unit level economics or the school's financial success is everything.
Sure. Yeah.
You can't replicate that financial success and keep that brand continuing to replicate the model you initially developed. And then your core model has to keep evolving too, which means your systems have to keep evolving. And so that complexity of running a successful business and then innovating and driving continuous improvement in the core business and then constantly evolving the franchised model takes intentionality and very strategic.
Yeah. And so that brings up some kind of questions, whether it be franchising or building out additional corporate offices. I have a friend locally here who talked to me about getting into the childcare after I had my own schools up here in Western New York. And, we had breakfast, number of conversations. He decided to get in and acquire two schools. Now he's at about 15 schools, very proud of what he's been able to do with where he's gone. He's our friendly competition in the area, and he's surpassed what I was doing, and he's done a wonderful job. Um, but what advice and guidance as people start to go from that one location and start to evaluate and go into others? We have a lot of different pressures, like, after COVID, all of the stuff, the cost of land and supplies, it's just gone through the roof. I just know in the past 2 years alone, you're talking about adding additional millions for developing a brand new property, right? We're not talking tens of thousands or hundreds, we're talking millions. And it's crazy for, I'm sure, you folks in both franchising, but also in developing your own, corporate approach where someone is doing their own schools, whether they have equity investment or they're doing it themselves. What kind of advice would you give for those aspiring leaders who are trying to expand in
So
this market?
Post COVID, I always think about looking for opportunities that exist to do things differently when you hit a wall like that, which there is a wall right now on
Sure.
being able to get a good return on investment if you're not with something that's already a proven model or you don't have scale and you can't reduce costs in other ways to a business, right? But in the case of today, post COVID, I'm sure aware of this, but there is probably 80, at least 80% of the childcare delivered in America today is by an independent operator. And
Yep.
many of those never started in the early education business. They were childcare centers. So you can have a childcare center that takes good quality care of children, but they don't have early education expertise. And today, with all the research on brain development, more states are requiring that the childcare centers have early education. So there's a lot of independent operators getting out of the business. And to me, if I was looking at this and I just had 3, 4, 10, 15, and I wanted to take advantage, I would think about, what are the independent operators? Can I get to know them? And do they fit the price point of the model that I have?
Sure.
Would I be able to acquire those and convert them then? Or acquire them, and some people do multi-branded models. I have 3 different brands, or there is some value to keeping a brand name if it has a lot of legacy within a community.
Yeah, like for instance, I have Inspire Learning in Childcare in addition to the back-end software company Inspire Care 360. I've had 6 locations. I'm actually down to 3 of them. One of them, though, I acquired as Cran Campus, and we just changed it to Inspire Cran Campus because there was so much passion behind it. We had generations of families who actually came through there.
Right.
So, when parents would come in, they would say, "You're not going to change the name," is it? Because I remember going to Cran Campus as a kid. And I was like, I just haven't been able to. We've gone as far as we could, but I hear what you're saying. When you think of, and you look at this, Joe, from where you guys are going and where you've come from, uh, talk to me a little bit about the people side of the business. As we all know, typically the secret sauce is in the people. My background is marketing also, so I have a lot of passion for marketing, like I'm sure you do. But I have a gut feeling that your success is oftentimes a lot, and I'm sure you would pontificate at this about the people you work with.
So people first, obviously. If you're in a service business, I don't care how good your model is, how brilliant your ideas are. If you can't bring them to life, it doesn't matter. And if you can't bring them to life consistently over and over and over again, that's the beauty of franchising, because the concept is you get the right people, you put them in with the right model, they can replicate it, then you get that consistency, and then you can grow. And so in the service business, for us, it's always been children first. It's that personal passion of children first. If you make every decision, is this right for the child and the family? Then if you deliver what you promise to the consumer, and if you can be differentiated, for us, we were early childhood educators. We were a half-day private preschool when we started. So we didn't have to take a childcare center and convert it to an early education and childcare center. We took a early education school and wrapped childcare around it. That's the difference, and I think really the essence of what makes Primrose. We're deep in our DNA. We are educators that use franchising as the method to replicate and scale our model. And we passionately driven to children and families first, and the teachers who bring it to life. And for us too, it's the leadership teams that are leading in every one of those schools. And the only way we get that replication of the quality that we want is by recruiting franchise owners who are aligned with what we believe. And our belief statement is who children become is as important as what they know.
Wow.
So we recruit people for who you are is as important as what you know.
Interesting. When you give guidance to franchise owners, and your team provides that guidance too, whether they're their own director or whether they have a director on staff, when you talk to them about interviewing and recruiting, what is your overall guidance about their recruiting process? Not so much where to do it, but when you're interviewing and talking to people, obviously passion's one of them for those interviewees that they're looking to bring in. What thoughts or guidance do you have as you have, leaders, owner operators out there who are trying to build up even maybe just one school and really trying to get the right people on their team? What guidance would you give them?
Build trusted relationships first, which is
Okay.
have a conversation and ask questions and then listen. And then as you do, as you're doing with me, what is the why? Why did you feel like this? Why did you do this? That if you talk to someone long enough before you start into the hard questions of, you know, can you work these hours and, you know, all the things that you need to know in terms of recruitment and retention as far as a position itself, it is really important for them to understand you care who they are and what they know and what they believe, not just what they can do.
Right. And so when you try to find out about what they believe, are you around situational awareness? Are you around storytelling? What happens to be the way that you like to consume that from when you're talking with someone to get to their why?
Interpersonal skills, right? Because the number one way a child learns is through adult-child interaction. I mean, they can learn many ways, but the thing that has the greatest, richest continual learning is when a child can connect with a teacher or a child can connect with a parent. The research
Sure.
tells us that. So if that's what we're looking for, is people, either people leaders that can recruit those people or those actual people themselves who are really who are delivering the service. If you can connect interpersonally with them and have a conversation, and they're able to express who they are and what they think and how they feel, and also ask questions that are, it's the questions they ask too, what's important to them, that builds that interpersonal relationship. And if you can do that very easily, those are probably going to be the people. If you talk about values and what's important to them, what would they like to do, how would they like to grow, what kind of environment do they want to be in, and if they talk about loving to work with other people, loving to interact with children, loving to be in environments that are joyful and happy, then you've got the person who will be a spark in a classroom, which is what you need to deliver on the promise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And from there, and you talk about so much about that interpersonal connection, how would you characterize your own leadership style?
Well, I'm a purpose-driven leader, but I'm also a strategic visionary. I look for opportunities, and then behind behind the passion is strategy. And I think strategy is so important. And it's not that I'm an expert at strategy, it's that I've learned from every way that I can, whether it's joining other organizations like the International Franchise Association or reading books. My two favorite books are Built to Last and Good to Great.
Yep.
My third
Yep.
is The Speed of Trust. Those
Yep.
are all books that are deeply, deeply steeped in case studies of other people's successes, what they did right, what they did wrong, and you learn over time there are consistent things that drive success, and it starts with the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you talk about strategy, some people out there think of, there's really two sides. There's the tactical thing, and then there's the strategic element. And in our industry, one of the bigger challenges we have, especially when we're small, we don't have a ton of investment dollars and there's no real backing. A lot of us proverbially are just keeping the wheels on the bus, right? And we're trying to make every day happen. We're trying to stay in ratio. We're trying to make sure that the health department doesn't come in, and we're trying to make sure, well, we're not trying to make sure they don't come in. They don't come in and find anything that would close us down, and so there is a number of things that almost force a lot of owner operators to be tactical. How do you, and I think you have to look back because I know now you've built a wonderful organization with some probably wonderful leaders who support the vision that you folks have.
Mhm.
How do you think, if you're looking at those folks and saying, and you probably do this with franchise owners too, to sometimes you have to move away from just the tactical so you could look at the bigger picture. You can look at the strategy. What is your guidance around there for people?
Well, the leaders of our schools work on the business and not in the business, right? If
You
you
have to
are
revisit
working
it.
in the business, you don't have time to work on the business. And if you're not working on the business, you're not assessing what's working, what's not, and thinking about how to do it more effectively, more efficiently, more cost effectively. And really in this business, my belief is you fill a school and everything else is right. You have, but if you're trying to pay the rent and you don't have the children in the school, then it is a constant battle, right? And
Right.
you can't save yourself to success, meaning financially save money, save money, save money. That's just not so. Don't go into a business if you're not if you are so underfunded that you can't do what it takes to make it successful.
Yeah.
Whatever your model is, at whatever price point it is, know that you can actually deliver whatever it is you say you're going to deliver and make a profit. If you can't make a profit, then you get into the tactic side of the business and it's a vicious flywheel and you never get out of it and you don't have time to work on your business because you're literally working in it. So
Yeah.
it's a complex business. It's not a simple business. And one school, one center on its own, depending on what your income is that you're used to in general, in a startup is hard to do. That's why franchising has been so successful.
Sure.
You don't have to be a startup. You can take the investment and someone's done all that for you and has continued to keep it competitive versus trying to start up on your own, which is why there are so many franchises in so many industries.
Yeah. And it makes an awful lot of sense because it really gives you a kickstart. And more than that, it gives you that whole back end and office support. So it keeps you focused narrowly so you don't go wandering off into the woods, as I like to say.
Think about, we have an IT department, right? We
Yeah.
have an AI department. We have a marketing department, right? We have an operational department. We have a finance department. We have all of these services that an independent operator wouldn't have on their own to pull on with all the systems and processes there to provide to them. And we have scales so we can bring cost-effective purchasing to them.
Sure.
And so you can tell I'm very passionate about franchising, but I didn't start out to want to be in the franchise business or be a franchisor. I was passionate about the business itself. All
Yeah.
this just came over time. But there was a point at which I had to step back and say, when I became the CEO of the company, what is it that we're going to do? Are we just going to be a regional company? Or are we going to be what you thought it could be someday, a national brand? And if it's going to be a national brand, this is strategy and vision. What does that look like and how do I get there? And it wasn't like I had to go figure it out myself. There's other industries with other successful brands that have done it. So just go study what they did and figure out what is it that the ones that are the best at it do, and then replicate it, deploy it, and customize it to your model.
I'm glad you just set the whole purpose for our podcast today. Because you are the expert and one of the experts in this industry, and we've had some wonderful people on, and you're just articulating a lot of those things. When when I look at, there's a few things that you just said that I want to play off of. One thing that you mentioned is you have an AI department. And I have some background in AI. We've developed an AI tool for regulations for all 50 states to be able to quickly go to all that. I'm not going to ask you sort of what your AI department does, but how do you think AI will be influencing the future of ECE and childcare? How do you think that's going to play, and where are your cautionary tales as to where you think the advantages are?
Well, I don't think the robots are going to take over the classroom. I do not believe that, but they are coming and they don't have hearts. You know that. Robots don't have hearts. So interpersonal skills that we talked about are not going to come from a robot.
Right.
So we happen to be in one of those industries where I don't think we're going to be as disrupted as some others will. But obviously, there's significant opportunities to use AI, whether you're talking about curriculum development, actual lesson plan content, or you're talking about marketing strategies or research that you want to do. And all the back end services that are getting automated today, like in the accounting departments, the finance departments, reportings and dashboards and those kind of things. AI is just taking it to a whole new level, right? And fairly quickly too. But there are places where AI cannot replace the human skills. So we know this. We know that I'll call them, we have IQ skills, and then we have EQ. And it's the EQ skills that we know in the 21st, well, in the rest of this century and for the future. It's the human skills that will be so much needed, and AI can't replace those.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because I know there's a lot of people who are resistant because of not understanding and not wanting to understand. So there's a lot of value in understanding how you could take advantage of it, because one of the things you mentioned earlier that I think was very strong and important is an operator to work on the business. And I sort of made a mention of the book, The E-Myth Revisited. And it's a really good one because he's like, are you the one behind?
We have a new chief marketing officer. I just gave that book to her on Monday. It's another one of my favorite books.
There you go. Yep. Are you the one wearing the hat behind the counter?
Yeah.
Or, are you the one who's thinking about the business? And when you think about that, because you were saying, you should be really looking at the operations. And I think it's very important because we are getting to a very quick, it's not a crossroad, but it is another, and I wouldn't say an evolution, it's almost a revolution how quick AI is ascending upon us. And with that, there are so many opportunities to manage back office costs, like you mentioned, from accounting to finance to legal to marketing and everything in between. But the EQ portion, if that is missing, things will fall apart. So there is significant value of taking advantage of some of those operational components of it. When you look at, because of your strength and your background in marketing, when you look to other people who are starting to build out their schools, and this is a little bit more tactical, but I think it's because of your marketing brain. I want to ask you that. What should be their thoughts around the marketing side of investment in marketing? A lot of people love to go by word of mouth, that word of mouth will get them to the next level. And sometimes it can, but I think it's also difficult. From your marketing brain, what do you say, Joe, as to guidance of how to invest in marketing and look to get a return for your company through how you market yourself?
Well, obviously the internet,
Sure.
anything to do with today's consumer word of mouth is still the number one way that parents make a choice. Who do they trust? The people they know who have children, and where are they, and what do they think about the location, right?
Right.
That hasn't changed. We first started talking about universal truths, and that's one of them. Safe, happy, and learning didn't change. It's not going to change. That's what people want to hear. But once they have that word of mouth, the first thing they do is they pick up their phone, their cell phone, mobile, and they then start searching the name of the location, and they search, testimonials, and they go to the website and they look at, they look at the name of the owner, and they look up the name of the company, and they go to LinkedIn, so you have to have a presence online. It's not optional if you're in this business or any business anymore. You have to have a presence online, and your social space, your social media. Social media is earned, and social media is so important because the ability for other parents to talk about you and for you to talk about yourself and tell your story is what connects. It's the human side of the business. If it were me and those are only dollars I had, that's what I would do. I would make sure that I had a incredibly powerful internet presence.
Yeah.
And you have to develop a website on your own. There's platforms you can get that can help you create a website. There's all kinds of resources to help you in understanding the media mix for marketing and how to use both paid and earned and owned marketing online because it can scale. It can scale. Whereas if you're buying advertising, it doesn't scale to that level. And that's where the consumer is going to go.
And one of the things that, and I'm going to pay you a big compliment right now, even though you've more than deserved it from me, is Primrose has a brand and likely has a brand experience at the very top of the game in the industry. And I haven't been in a Primrose school. Next time in Atlanta, I'm going to call you up. I'm going to bring you out to lunch and I'm going to have you bring me into a school. Okay.
I would love to.
And I'd love to see it. But the brand precedes itself, which is super important. And the only way for me to get that is through the brand experience that I see through levels of marketing. And that doesn't mean that someone is pushing a story on me that isn't true. All it means is whether it be testimonials, whether it be visual experiences, things of that nature, you've created an image in my mind about what Primrose is. Sort of like how Nike or American Express or Apple or some of the biggest brands have created an image that when you hear the name, you all of a sudden think of something. Primrose has done an amazing job of that, of who they are and what they believe in. So when you look at that brand experience and cultivating that brand from a leadership perspective, what's important to you in cultivating a brand?
Authenticity and consistency, but most emotional connection. The emotional connection.
Explain that a little bit more with the emotional connection. I think I have it, but for those who might be hearing going, okay, what does she mean?
Well, whether it's visual or verbal or content messaging, it needs to connect emotionally. If you have just a second or two to connect with someone, the words that are there or said or the picture that you see, for us, it's trust.
Yep.
Now, how can you bring the word trust to life? Right? Because at the end of the day, that's the number one thing you're leaving your child with a stranger. Can I trust them? And if you can't reflect visually, verbally, content, messaging, if you can't reflect that in your marketing, then you get caught up we have a lot of people in not just in childcare, but in almost any kind of marketing, thinks that they have to put everything they can possibly say about their business, in an ad, or say everything they can immediately. And in reality it's an emotional connection. You're building trust, and the power of trust is in the world we live in today more than ever before. The word trust is so critical.
Absolutely. Because I think it's been broken so many times by so many that we value it so greatly, and just when you talk about that, Joe, I just imagine driving down like I-75 or I-85 and seeing billboards and seeing the billboards where they want to mention every possible thing about their product as to the one that might just have a child in the arms of a caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
And not even a word on the billboard, other than maybe, who it is in the bottom right-hand corner. Which one is going to have much more of an impact? I think we all know it has nothing to do about the words.
No, in fact, we have a very good mentor here that we've watched over the years here in Atlanta, and that is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A
Absolutely.
Open 6 days a week, and they outperform all other brands in the same category that are open 7 days a week. So that's pretty powerful. But when, their cows, they have had the Chick-fil-A cows, I don't know, 15 or 20 years. And when you see those billboards and you see the ads, there's an emotional connection.
Yeah.
Many times it's not even talking about chicken sandwiches.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a good chicken sandwich, but
right.
It's a chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
Emotional connection to the way that they built that brand and market that brand.
And I think it's really important because that is one of the areas that brand purpose and that brand identity, I think is something that helps you get there. And I think you folks have done a great job with it. I want to, because we actually have some limited time, we only have a few minutes left, believe it or not. We already blew through all this time.
So fast.
I don't know how, but I'm just learning a ton. So I'm the thief here, I guess, in the conversation. I'm burgling everything you have. Um, but I want to go to sort of you know, the bigger challenges maybe. And as you ascended as a leader, what were some of the bigger challenges that really gave you pause during your journey? And sometimes, they don't even have to be with the business. They could be things how they have affected your family, how they've affected you personally, your health. It could be how they've affected, the people you work with. What are some of the things that have given you pause through your career where you're like, okay, I had to take a really deep breath and, this is how I got around it. If you don't mind sharing one or two.
I don't mind. Um, so I've talked a lot about strategy and consistency, consistency and experience, consistency and execution. That is a mindset that has been a big part of this brand and the success of the brand. And it is of any brand if you're trying to scale to a national level, the consumer needs to experience the same thing wherever they go, right? So part of that is, I would say I'm an A-type personality, and I am what I call a reformed perfectionist. So um, this is leading somewhere. The reality of this is that for many years, I was so driven with the passion for the experience for the children and the consistency that when I spoke or when I um, had opportunities to interact with either our entire support team, our entire franchise owner organization, a small group team, I was always talking about how important it was we get it right, get it right, get it right. We have to deliver the best. Our vision is to deliver the best and most trusted early education and childcare services for children and families across America. Best. Well, the best in my mind was everything's right. Well, the reality of that is human beings are not perfect. If I thought that and I did run a couple of the schools when I first came to learn the business, as well as I do, that you cannot create an environment. Let's say you have 180 capacity school and you have, 50 teachers and you've got twice that number of parents or families coming and going all day long in one building, and you think you're going to orchestrate perfection. It isn't possible. Nor is it possible to get every single school to do everything all the time right. It's just impossible. And the stress level of aspiring to do that was creating all this joy that I wanted, was creating tension and
Right.
stress level of what if I don't get it right? What if she finds out I didn't do this right or I didn't do that right? And I don't know, one day it just hit me. I was actually giving a speech at a conference, and I looked across the room and the people looked tense. And I just stopped and I said, oh my gosh, I just realized I'm talking about how we are the best. But the fact is that the joy in this business is the children and the families and giving back to the communities, and the success that you have with your businesses, that you have quality of life and you can control your lives, franchise owners. And we don't need to be perfect. What we need to do is tell parents, we're going to do our very best. The word best is I'm giving it my best today. And if I don't get it right, I'll do better tomorrow. And it was,
Yeah.
I lifted a giant cloud off of the organization, but I didn't mean to do it, but unintentionally, I was creating a stress level. And I can tell you, even today, I can walk into a school. The minute you walk in, you can feel, is the culture and environment in this place happy? Are they joyful? Is there a feeling of comfort and peace, or is it a stressful, rigid, unhappy place to be? And if that's what you walk into, no parent wants that for their child. Nobody wants to work there.
Yeah. You really nailed something that I think is super important, because a lot of people who are entrepreneurs tend to be perfectionists too. And they tend to want things a certain way. Unfortunately, some of us couldn't work out in corporate America because we wanted things our way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, I'm going to do it my way now. And I'm putting the money in and pushing all my chips in. And, and I'm hoping to get there. And sometimes you just said, I think something that was really important. Instead of being the best, striving for your best are two totally separate things. And one can be managed and one can actually be accounted. The other one is almost an impossibility to
Yeah.
be planning on being the best as to striving to be the best. So,
Well, when I've always felt like when you tell someone we're going to strive to be our best, but it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to question why, and it's okay to say, what if we did it this way or that way? Because really the innovation comes there,
yeah,
right? And so giving up perfection is one of the best things I ever did in my life because people around me are happy now. And I'm a much happier person too. I can't say every day I'm this way, but most of the time, every day I am this way. And when I backslide, I just have to get myself back in that mindset.
oh, that's wonderful. I only have two more questions for you because we've actually run out of time. The first question is for you, if you were to pass on any words of guidance, you've already given a bunch like interpersonal skills and how to engage and passion around what you're doing. But if there's anything you want to leave the audience with, any thoughts, what would those be?
So I have a plaque on my desk and it says on the front, I'm still learning. And on the back, it was given to me years ago by someone. I don't even really remember who it was, which is a sad thing, but I have bought this plaque over and over again. I share it with people because it means so much to me. But at 87 years old, Michelangelo was finishing painting the Sistine Chapel on his back, this magnificent, magnificent chapel ceiling. And someone asked him, oh my gosh, how did you do this? At 87 years old, how did you do this? And he said, I'm still learning. So if he at 87 years old could still be still learning, we all could be still learning all the time. And that's probably how he got to be as successful as he was at what he did.
Yeah, well, if I get to the point where I learn how to carve marble to the point that I can make a cloth look transparent, I'll know that I have learned a lot.
But there's an attitude in that, right?
That's
It's
right.
better tomorrow than I am today. I'm still
Absolutely. So
those.
my
It,
last question for you, Joe, is what's your favorite Beatles song?
oh my gosh, I love them all so much.
And I'll share mine if you can, you
Uh,
share yours. I
uh,
got pressure on you now for being the former president.
I know, shame on me. A Hard Day's Night probably is my favorite song.
Oh, there you go. Way back then, and it's awesome. It's an amazing song. I played guitar in band for years,
Did
and
you?
yeah, I've been a lead guitarist for blues bands and what have you. And I've recently been out of it for about 5 years, but for about 35, 40 years, I'm unfortunately getting up there. I'd have to say something because George Harrison was so underrated. Something is probably one of my favorite songs, but it's hard to have a Beatles song that's your favorite. There's just so many.
And when I was young, I sang a lot of those songs, but the words didn't mean to me what they mean to me now as an adult when I think on them, right? They just didn't have the same
Exactly.
meaning. I had
No,
rhythm and I love the words, but I really didn't pay that much attention to them. When you go back and listen to some of the words of some of their songs, they're just magnificent.
it's just prolific. It is sort of the Michelangelo of music. So, hey, we keep on learning. That's how it is. Thank you so much, Joe Kirchner with Primrose. You've just been absolutely wonderful and a delight to talk with today. Hopefully, everybody out there has had an opportunity to grab some tidbits, grab some ideas, some thoughts about your business, and look at how this can be helpful for you. We are also always looking for interesting people to be on this for different leaders within our industry so other people can learn from this. So don't hesitate to reach out. Again, I want to thank Joe. My name is Tony DiAgostino. I'm the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. And thank you for joining ECE CEO Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. We'll all talk to you very soon. Have a wonderful day and a great rest of your summer. Take care now.
You have been listening to ECE Biography, Sage Wisdom for Childcare Leaders. Thank you very much for listening. We're greatly appreciative of your time. We will continue to produce these programs on an ongoing basis, and please hit the download button and subscribe to our podcast so you do not miss an episode. Thank you very much and hope you have a wonderful day.